Yeah, we are live. Just give me 1 second for the speaker control. Yeah, that has been quite a ticklish issue, but it's okay. We'll survive it. Yeah, so we had done till the verse number, we had done till the verse number 17. And let's kind of do a summary of that before we go to the next verse. So we'll quickly do a summary of that, and then we are in a much better position to understand it. So, what are these three gunas? And Bhagwan is sort of explaining to him that it is important for you to understand the inner mechanism of the mind, because if you understand it, whatever I told you about the relationship between Purusha and Prakriti within you, or in other words, if Bhagwan is trying to explain to him, in other words, if you pay attention to the details. These are the operational details of our consciousness and how sort of it unfolds, assumes different names and forms, gets modified, and how we kind of get trapped in its functioning. Therefore, in chapter 14, he sort of is speaking in a few verses about these three gunas and how they are working. What did he mention? First, he mentioned that the sattva is nirmalatvat prakasaka anamayam. That is what it is all about. Sukha and how they are all kind of trying to bind us up, but there are different ways. So it's sukhatmaka and prakasatmaka. So jnana and sukha. These are two predominant ideas or predominant orientations of the sattva guna in us. When they dominate, these two orientation, two principles will come into play. And look at the beauty of it. These are good things, but they also cause attachment, because being good is not becoming self realized. The self is beyond what is good and bad. Good and bad are still areas where we are having value judgments and we consider this phenomenal reality to be correct, to be accurate, to be perfect, and we enjoy it because we are sattvika. That itself will become a bondage. So the sattva thing binds us, sukhena jnana nature. These two principles. It will give you good knowledge. It will give you good orientation, an open mind, a reasonable mind. It will give you some good habits, clean fooding, sleeping, working, and then you are a very successful person as well. And everyone loves you. There's a good energy around you, and there is how you get trapped, not as a prisoner, but you are not willing any further to look beyond it, and that is a very good state to have. But there is a beyond, and that's what Bhagavan will say in verse number 22nd and 23rd, where we are progressing towards. Whereas the rajas is associated with two principles called trishna and asanga, attachment and craving, trying to have what you don't have and trying to hold on to whatever you achieve. And so there are 4 5 signals, markers, as you say: lobha, prabritihi, arambha, and karmanam asamaha. You never sort of tired of doing more and more things. One you have finished, you want to do another. And spriha. Spriha can be both good and bad, but here some sort of a attachment. And moha, that is the marker, that is the main principle which sort of dominates the work of tamas. And so this is born out of ignorance and leads to more ignorance. So it's basically slipping down from one level of ignorance to another once we are dominated by tamas. So he said that tamasastha jnanam vitti mohanam sarvadehinam. That is what in the verse number 8 he mentioned this. That sort of binds up all these, whosoever it's animal or human being or birds, you have these principles of laziness, going back, having faulty understanding, all these. And what are the main lingas or prakasha? Viparita buddhi, being talking in a negative language, having wrong understanding, aprabriti, not ready to do anything. Whatever you may have wonderful advice for him or her, but that person who is dominated by tamas is not going to listen to you. Then pramada, there will be a very clear roadmap ahead of him or her, but that fellow will not be interested. It's not that he's confused. He knows what he wants, but he'll not exactly be focused on doing what's in his or her interest. Then moha, a complete delusion. So these are the markers. And what happens if we die having predominant presence of sattva or rajas or tamas? Bhagavan has explained it nicely that in ideal situation, I mean there are different commentators saying different things, but ideally, as Madhusudana Saraswati says, he can go up till Brahmaloka, wait there and get liberation. Let's imagine he doesn't go there because there is nothing called complete predominance of sattva. There may be a bit of rajas because only one guna cannot be there. That also we know that this whole prakriti is trigunatmika. In that sense, he will be reborn in auspicious families, as Bhagavan has mentioned in long detail in chapter number 6. If you remember, Bhagavan has discussed that. So he'll be born in a good family, he will meet good people, and he will start his sadhana from where he has ended. So he will be born with an atmosphere which is conducive for his future punya karma, if he's sattvika. And he will also start having capacity for jnana sadhana. Not necessary that he studies Sankara Bhashya. Ramana Maharshi did not do it. And there are a lot of people who have a natural opening. Today somebody called me up and I mean that person was talking about his own spiritual thing. He has not read anything, but what I heard is that he perhaps is kind of privileged by very birth that he has a deeper inclination for uh, divine communion, kind of trying to live a pure life and being able to avoid entrapments. And a lot of people are like that. They're born with that purity because they have done a lot of sadhana in the last birth. They must have ended the last birth at a moment of sattvic predominance. So they will have punya karma, already done punya karma, therefore sattvika mood towards the end of life. And then they'll be reborn with greater capacity, with more wealth, with better parents, better friends, better spouse, all that for doing more punya karma plus for jnana sadhana. And then if a person is predominantly rajasic and he abandons his body, what happens? He will be appropriately given another human life where he'll be able to fulfill his desired activities based on his own qualifications, his attitude, his orientation, his intellectual and physical resources. Like for example, the person was a great sports person, but he was a cricketer. Okay, let's take the case of one great cricketer that we know. Let's imagine, like for example, there was a great footballer and then he was very physically active and this and that, but he always watched a few guys play cricket and he thought this is a very interesting game. It's quite possible that he'll be reborn with the same energies and other things, maybe in a country where cricket is a popular game. Then he takes that desire forward. I mean, these are possibilities. So he is reborn with some workload and social station based on his own qualification. In our spiritual parampara, in a tradition, whenever we use the word adhikara or qualification, we are not talking about either degrees or birth or anything. We are essentially talking about the variables which can be associated with us. What are those variables? Like in terms of how much of bhakti, how much of vairagya, how much of antakarna shuddhi, how much of sharpness of the mind. That is what decides what we are qualified for. Okay, so a rich man may not be qualified enough to do Vedanta, whereas a poor person may be highly qualified for Vedantic sadhana. So it has nothing to do with external or intellectual qualifications. These word adhikari bheda, this adhikara, as Bhagavan Shankaracharya says, has a lot to do with the purity of our consciousness, our habits. Like Thakur Ramakrishna would always say that, a person, there is something called, he said, Unmana Samadhi, that you are all over in material life and suddenly you sit in Samadhi. It may not last too long because the materiality of our life will assert its presence back in our consciousness. Therefore, he says that Ishvara Sandhana, you have to sort of constantly meditate on it. And he says that a bit of bhakti helps it. Like you have a fish hiding in water, you put a bait to capture it. Similarly, you have to capture the grace of God by giving him a bait. Unko patana padega. And what is that? What is that bait with which you're going to catch the fish? And God's attention, God's grace. That is bhakti and good karma yoga. He says essentially bhakti is a very powerful bait for God to be more compassionate, kind towards you. Whereas a person who is predominantly tamasic and is going to abandon his body is more likely to go down and be born in a mudha yoni, because his consciousness is dominated by pramada, alasya, aprabriti, aprakasha, moha. These are the things, and therefore, most likely, he will be in a tiryak yoni, horizontal body. What are the things? He could be any animal, or now I think we have reasons to believe that he will be born in a human condition where he is more likely to lead an animal life without having that opening or possibility to sort of, lead a good life. So he may be born in a very, very difficult situation. Now, what are the consequences of the karmas which we do? Because when he says sattvika, it means sattvika karma also, and then it has its own result. So, what are the sattvika phalas? He says that these phalas can be, these phalas are nirmala phala, and they are not tainted by the problems that we associate with rajas and tamas. They are not mixed up with rajas and tamas. You will have pure orientation, a clean mind, a very ethical behavior, ethical conduct, and stuff like that. On the other hand, if he's a predominantly rajasic person and he does a lot of rajasic karmas, he's committed, he may have the opportunity or a life condition in which he gets a lot of dukkha, because work always involves a lot of stress. So you will have some dukkha, but there'll be some sukha. So adhika dukkha alpa sukha, that is what he's saying. Now you might say, what do you think about somebody who's born in a billionaire's family, or a boy or a girl who becomes a billionaire very young in his life? Like one lady in India has become a billionaire. I don't remember what's her name, but some startup, and she has become a billionaire. You have a billionaire in Bangalore who is just 32, 33 years of age, who ran away from school when he was in class 10. These guys have definitely done loads and loads of punya in the last birth, but in this birth also, if you watch their life, you can very well apply Bhagavad Gita and make analysis of their success. They are one pointed, they're single pointed, and they keep working on it. It doesn't happen out of the blue. There's nothing called fate in Bhagavad Gita approach, because our own past karmas put together, when we encash it at one point, it starts giving results at one particular point. We call it bad luck or good luck. So that's how it sort of enables us. Bhagavad Gita enables us to develop a sense of equanimity, to accept both success and failure without excitement or depression, because it's your hard work which is coming back to you. Now, if and then another product of this rajasic thing is that he will have more desire. That is lobha. That is one dangerous thing, because he's getting caught up in a cycle of doing work and getting success and then craving for more success, but he's not thinking about self-realization and stuff like that. In sharp contrast, if a person is always in a tamasic mood and his kind of activities he does are largely tamasic, what is the result of that sort of thing? What are the outcomes, consequences? He'll be reborn, we know, in a positive journey, but what about that in this life itself? He is going to experience what's called moha, a kind of delusion. His mudha, is refusing to see light or see the truth, and then broadly ajnana. Moho is a certain manifestation of Ajnana, but it's kind of mutually reinforcing, and a lot of pramada. So some of these slokas are kind of a bit repetitive, but Bhagavan is kind of trying to hammer them into our consciousness. So, like a mother tells the son when the boy is going to the hostel, and beta, you have to do this, you have to keep your money, and you please remember that you don't disturb others when they're studying, don't forget your keys, and a whole lot of advice. He keeps repeating them, changes the sentences, but keeps hammering those advices into the brain of a child out of compassion and love. And that is what Bhagavan is doing here, sort of trying to hammer these things because we are likely to forget. And that's one of the reasons why I thought that we'll just summarize last 10, 12 verses. And then Moha, Ajnana, Pramada. And then he says that where do these people go? The top ones, that is the next verse we are going to do, that those who are sattvika, they will go higher up, means Uttarayana Marga. It can mean two things, that in this very life also you'll make spiritual progress, where it can also mean that after we drop this body, as we discussed, that he'll be reborn in a very auspicious, good spiritual family or life situation, or he can go to the Devaloka or the Brahmaloka and stuff like that. The Rajasic people are always stuck in the middle. So they stay in the middle, they'll have another human life, they will do more activities because they have a desire for doing a lot of activities. Intellectual work can also be Rajasic. Work can also be sattvic. So external manifestation or use of a certain naming word, like this is work, this is jnana, this is bhakti, doesn't make anything either sattvic or rajasic or tamasic. Because Bhagavan is going to tell you in coming chapters, in chapter 16, even how any dana, any karma, even bhakti can be rajasic or tamasic or sattvic. So sattvic, there's nothing called a particular word with which we can say this is this. Sattvic is not an object. Sattvic is referring to a range of variables which might apply to whole range of our qualities, our activities, our moods, our conduct, our personality, everything. So these are kind of guiding principles, and that is why it's so difficult to kind of sort of put them into words where we can quickly understand how they are working. A person might be very active person, but he may be an extremely sattvic person. It takes time to understand. I remember one very good memory I have. Once in Nepal, in Lumbini, I had gone to that Buddhist village that is about 10 years back, maybe about 10 years back. Yeah, maybe about 10 years back or maybe more. So we had gone on a project, and then there was a road project I was going to see, and I said, okay, let's take a detour to visit that whole. It's like a whole city of different Buddhist temples, and the Burmese people, the Myanmar people, have a Vipassana center. I went there, and there was one lady in charge of it. The lady was about approaching 60 or something. So, and she was giving advice to some American. And because I was in a hurry, I just asked one question. She just looked at me, smiled, and started talking to him again. I understood and I kept quiet. And she talked to him for some time and then said, okay, tell me, how can I help you? After she had given him guidance. And I was watching her all the while. She was exactly telling whatever little is required without being preachy, because there was a Vipassana thing that guy wanted to do, and she said he has to do everything. Meditation is 12 hours a day, so 1 hour walking, 1 hour sitting. They have their own method, which is different from the Goenka method. But after the whole conversation she had with him, I was actually getting all my questions answered. At the end of it, she turns to me and with full attention says, okay, tell me now, how can I help you? And she gave me another 10, 15 minutes to tell what are the Vipassana methods being followed in India. And if I do it there, what are the things I'll have to do extra? And that there are mosquitoes, that food is very simple, life is very hard, and she was doing all that. If you watch that closely, that she's an extremely sattvic person. That sort of becomes evident in each and everything she's doing. And that doesn't happen in a day. This is repetition of a certain practice again and again and again. So even though she was speaking, actually she was meditating. One could feel it, that she has sort of converted her whole Jivanacharya into a meditation. And she sort of is like a machine responding to everything from that Buddhistic understanding of whatever they have is, that samatha and the vipassana and nothingness and emptiness and loving kindness. Whatever the theories they have, she was living it. And that was picking out through her activities, not through her words. Through her words, she was explaining what is Vipassana. So she was explaining what is Indians doing, what the Myanmar people do, what the South Koreans do, what the Tibetans do. But through her action, through her gestures, the way she was relating to strangers coming and talking to her, you could say, you could see that her activities, the whole Porshana, was kind of speaking about the tradition that she represented. That is what Bhagavan is kind of guiding us, that we need to choose and not get confused that this is sattvic, this is rajasic. Outwardly, it's impossible for you to act like a saintly person 24/7. No, one is not talking about it. We're talking about the predominant presence of a particular quality and how to cultivate it. Bhagavan is going to sort of hint that, but he's also going to tell us how to go beyond it, not get enamored by this. Because our purpose is Atma Jnana, and that's what we're going to do today. The Rajasi guys will be stuck in the middle. That means they'll be reborn as human beings. But the Tamasi guys, Adho Gachanti, he will going to say in the verse number 18, they'll go down because they'll go to a lower life, a difficult life situation. It could be that of an animal, it could be a human life, but very, very, very akin to Manushya Rupe Mrigascharanti, something like a very despicable human situation, very difficult to bear with, a life which doesn't give us enough opportunity to explore the inner meaning of life. That is what is kind of mentioned here. So this is about all that we have done so far, because now as soon as we go beyond verse number 20, 21, we sort of will forget all these three gunas. But in everyday life, to my mind, these 15 verses, the more you reflect on them, the more we can organize our lives, but we can actually advise and help our students, our children, anybody who comes to us for help, because we are doing some Vedanta Adhyana and Satsang, people would be looking forward to us. So that is why I said that this was very important. So let's look at the verse number 18. We'll make progress further. Urdhvam gachanti sattvastha madhye tishtanti rajasaha jaghanya gunavrittastha adho gachanti tamasaha. Urdhvam gachanti, they go upwards, they go in a northerly direction, they improve. um, who are these people? Those who are in that sattva guna, sattva stha. So sattva ye, te, those people who are established in sattva. Now, Madhusudana will kind of give it a twist, because he's talking about sattvastha as if it's a platform, and he's saying rajasaha, those who are rajasika. But when he's talking about these unfortunate habits of the tamasika people, he's saying jaganya guna brittasta. The jaganya guna britti, the operation of that despicable guna or disposition called tamas. That sort of, they are repeating that britti, because it's kind of hinting that that low level of consciousness, that low level of mental, what do you call it, delusional addiction to certain ways of living, that state of craving is sustaining itself with the help of repetitive practice of same set of responses, same set of orientation and understandings and ideas and stuff like that. So that is kind of a, in economics they talk about these equilibriums, like, so you have, there's a virtuous circle and there's a vicious circle. So you have that low life equilibrium where all the negatives have kind of created a very negative platform for that particular person who is trapped there, and he's unable to come out of it. But Madhusudana says because that vritti word is added to the tamas guna, we need to understand when he's saying sattvastha or rajasaha, he's essentially saying those who are engaged in sattvika vrittis or rajasika vrittis, because it's not like a chair on which you are sitting. It's about thinking in a certain way. It's about taking moral decision in a certain way. It's about right and wrong and how do we decide it, how do we relate to other people, how do we perform our duties. And therefore, these are all about how that particular thing is operational. Is it in a sattvic way? Is it in a rajasic way? Or is it in a tamasic way? That is what determines whether he's going up or he's getting stuck in the middle or he's going down. Okay. Now, this he's saying, now let's look at Sankara Bhashya. Kincha urdhvamiti, urdhvam gachanti, devalokadi Devalokadishu utpadyante. So they will have the privilege to go to Devaloka, Brahmaloka, etc. Satvastha, Sattva Guna Vrittastha. Makes it very clear, Shankaracharya. Madhya Tishtanti Manusheshu Utpadyante Rajasaha. Those who are kind of engaged in rajasic activities, rajasic ways of thinking, they have this priha or trishna, and they have what he mentions, asanga, craving or aspiration for having more and more things and trying to hold on to them. So that is the typical materialistic person's philosophy of life. They will get stuck in that human level. Not a bad idea though. It's much better than becoming tamasic. Jaghanya guna vrittastha, those who are in that jaghanya, hateable, despicable, not to be aspired for, in that sort of operational mode, those guys, where do they go? Jaghanya chaso gunasya, that is tamasika guna, which is jaghanya. Jaghanya gunaha tamasaha, tamas tasya vrittam, who are engaged in that. What are these vrittis of a tamas? He is again repeating it. Nidra alasyadi. Because we have already mentioned that. What are the things you have? You will have nidra and alasya, aprakasa, apravriti, pramada, moho, all these things we have already discussed. So they will get stuck there. And who are the people who sleep a lot? Animals, snakes, right? So he'll have an animal body. Say Nidalasadi Tasmin Sita, who are in that state, Jaghanya Guna Vrittasta Mudha. These guys who are mudhas, where do they go? Adhogachanti, they go down. Adhogachanti Paswadishu Utpadyante Tamasaha. They'll be reborn in life conditions which are very akin to that of the animals, or they'll be reborn as animals. The theological view is they will be reborn as animals. I'm not challenging it, but it's quite possible that even if you are born as a human being, think about it, it will be very miserable if you want to live a mere human life. Now, if we look at the Madhusudana, Idanim Satvadi Gunabhrittasthanam Prag Uttam Eva Phalam Urdhvam Urdhva Madhya Urdhvam Adhyayo Bhavena Aha. So urdhva madhya adho bhavena ah. So he's giving that three options: either you go up, get stuck in the middle, or you go down. Atra tritiye gune, when tamasic guna, guna britta savada prayogat, because he said guna britta stha, because he's brought in that word britta, which Shankaracharya has just mentioned it without explaining. He's giving reason for doing so. Adhyurapi Brittam eva vivakshitam. So Bhagavan is intending that we always associate the word Britti, that he is doing Rajasika Britti or Tamashika Britti or Sattvika Britti. Iti vivakshita means intending to be explained. Tena Sattvasta Sattva Britti Sastri Jnana Karmani cha Nirasa. What is Sattva Britti? And he is giving it a little traditional thing, but let's put it in a context. What he's saying is that Sastriya, whatever is approved, the set of advices which we have inherited in our spiritual tradition, that we should be compassionate, we should not harm others, we do well, we work, but we don't cheat, we don't try to, magvudha kasyachit dhanam, Ishvasya Upanishad says, don't try to steal from others. Why? Because tena taktena vunjita, you will get all the sukha only by overlooking that. That means when you overlook material desire, that is the first condition, as Ramakrishna used to say, Kamini Kanchan. You sort of have to get away from that craving for either gold or women. That's a kind of primary condition, primary qualifying principle for somebody to have ascension, spiritual ascent, for greater self realization. Tena satvasta sattvabrite sastri jnana karmani cha nirata. But we can say in a more secular philosophical way that this guy is a reasonable character, he has ethical conduct, and he sort of is a person with a harmonious mind. What they call, that positive psychology. He's a guy who believes in good things and he's sort of doing those things and he will benefit from them. Now, um, then this is what Satvasta Karmacha Nirata and Gachanti. Okay. Satya Loka Paryantam Devalokam Gachanti. It's like Bhu, Bhuva, Swaha, Maha, Janaha, Tapa, Satyam. So if you go up, he goes till that lok. Devis Utpadyante Jnana Karma Taratamyena. So in even Devatas also, what kind of a celestial existence he's going to get largely depends on his Jnana Karma differences. Where has he reached? How much punya he has done? How much jnana he has done? If he's fairly done a great upasana, Bhagavan has mentioned it clear in chapter 8, he'll directly go to that Brahmaloka and he'll be there in a blissful existence. Okay. Tatha madhya manusya loke punya papa mishre. So he kind of mixed with some punya and papa. That is the Rajasic thing, because there'll be some sattvic thing in him as well. Tishtanti. Not to urdhvam, but he doesn't go up. Gachanti adhoba. Nor does he fall down. He'll be reborn as a human being. Manusheshu utpadyante. Rajasa rajoguna vritte lobhadi purvake rajase karmani nirata. So they have a bit of greediness, not in a negative thing, but they are what positive people, the management guys say, they're great achievers. They have a craving, they have an aspiration, they want to do more and more. If you get very close to these guys who are very successful, you will feel like puking, by the way, because some of them, they have so much of craving for success, they actually don't value too much of ethical consideration. So if you get very close to a great successful person, you may not necessarily enjoy the company. I mean, this is just a warning. You can go close and you'll find out that I don't want to be like that. I'll rather be less successful, but I want to have a bit of balance in life, and sort of you can have that madhyam mark or whatever. And then Rajasa Rajaguna Britte, Lobha Adi Purvake Rajase Karmani Nirata, Jaganya Guna Brittasta, Jaganyasya Gunadvaya Apekshaya. So this Moho and Agyana, those who are the lower guys, the paschada bhav, they are always backwards. They have that principle of getting dragged backwards. And once I was doing one training program for documentation, and one guy came up with a very honest intervention. I said, any guy has any problem in writing down? He said, I have a problem. I said, what is it? He said, whenever I start writing a report, I get my material, whatever training you're saying, how to put your material together, organize your thoughts, I do all that. Then he says that there is something called, I have a back gear problem. I said, what is that? He said, I write half a page, I write one page, then I have a doubt whether this is the best way to write. I just stop it. I think I'll do it tomorrow. But there is a back gear coming. The vehicle goes backwards. What is said about a certain official task is very true about spiritual life, about all of us. We have our purva sanskaras trying to pull us back. We got to recognize it. Then only can we defeat it, because it's not one we are going to do. As we discussed earlier, you remember, Bhagavan says that the spiritual sadhana is like that tiny bird trying to dry the ocean up by picking up water with his beak, isn't it? And that's how Garuda Bhagavan comes and God's grace comes and helps us. So we just have to have hope and not feel bad about that back drag, whatever backward drag. But these guys are victims of very powerful backward pull. That's why they're called tamasic. It's not that others are not facing it. Others don't have moments of inattention. Others don't have some problem. The case of tamasic people is that they were overwhelmingly, sort of pulled back with a very powerful force, which is holding them back, and they have to defeat it. And to defeat it, one great way, Bhagavan says, don't fight with Maya, don't fight with these gunas. Focus on me. Mama Maya Duratya. And he's going to say that again as we move forward, because Arjuna is going to ask that question again. Okay, so they adhogachanti paswadishu utpadyante kadachit jaganya gunavritasta satvika rajasascha bhavanti ata aha tamasa iti. Because sometimes it's quite possible that these rajas and sattvic people may also have a bit of tamasic thing. So that is why he's specifically saying that those who are predominantly tamasic doesn't mean others don't have any of it. Tamasa sarvada tamapradanaha itiresang kadachit tadvrittastveti na tatpradhana iti bhavaha. So it's not that others don't have any tamas in them. They do have, but they are not tama pradhana. It's not that a sattvic person doesn't feel a bit of laziness or he doesn't feel like wasting a bit of time. No, it's not that. But he's not tama pradhana. He's sattva pradhana. A rajasic person is raja pradhana. Doesn't mean he doesn't meditate or he doesn't do spiritual things or he doesn't laze around and he doesn't indulge in negative things. It's question of what predominantly takes control of our consciousness. That is the particular thing. Now let's go to the next verse, the verse number 19, where it's kind of how does that person sort of will be free from this? Okay, that is the question. So Shankaracharya will say this: Punaha purushasya prakritistatva rupena mithyagyanena yuktasya bhogyeshu guneshu sukha dukha mohatmakeshu sukhi dukhi mudha aham asmi ityevam rupa yah यह संगः तत्कारण पुरुषस्य सद असद योनि जन्म प्राप्ति लक्षणस्य संसारस्य इति समासेन पूर्वाध्याये यदुक्तं तद यह सत्वं रजस्तम इति गुणाः प्रकृति संभवाः इत्यतः आरभ्य गुणस्वरूपं गुणवृत्तं स्ववृत्तेन च गुणानां बन्धकत्वं गुणवृत्ति निबध्यस्य च पुरुषस्य या गतिः इति एतत् सर्वं मिथ्या ज्ञानम् अज्ञानमूलं च बन्धकारणं विस्तरेण उक्त्वा अधुना सम्यक् दर्शनात् मोक्ष वक्तव्य इत्याह भगवान् न अन्यम् इति. So he is given a good introduction, because that's why I said we need to summarize. I thought I should summarize the game of gunas, because we are going to a different level of discussion, and that is about how to transcend these Trigunaatmika Prakriti and focus on Bhagavan and go towards Atmajan. What is he saying is very beautiful. What he's saying is Purushasya Prakritista Rupena, Prakristatva Rupena. When we are a prisoner of Maya or Avidya, because we have this Purusha Kshetra and Kshetragya, and this Prakriti has two aspects, Para Prakriti, Apara Prakriti. We are trapped in it. Okay, and when we are in that thing, that means we have identified with this glass cell, which is not real, but because of purva sanskara, papa punya, we are caught up there. It's like you met an old friend. Actually, you don't have any relationship. Okay, it's quite possible. I'm giving a real life situation. How we get trapped in these three prakritis and whatever. So you met a friend of yours, a classmate of yours, who was never a friend of yours. Okay, and then suddenly he meets you and he knows that you are doing reasonably well in life and he hasn't done anything. He's a bum. Okay, so he meets you, he said, "Hi, how are you?" And he becomes extremely friendly with you. Maybe he was a good student, but you were never friends. Then he targets you. So he establishes a relationship very quickly, and he has a plan to borrow money and not return it to you. Okay, I mean, dangerous thing. So he becomes very good friends, and he then suddenly he comes and knocks at your door and says, "Yeah, suddenly this happened, and I have to just give this installment in the car, and it's possible for you to give me 1 lakh rupees or something. Can you give me this? And because he's a smart guy, you give that money. And see, you never had a relationship. Think about it. You never had a friendship. You were never friends. You were just classmates. You presumed friendship. And then aspirationally, you thought you need to be kind. And then you surrendered to his game and you gave some money to him, which he's not going to return to you. And then you blamed your fate or you blamed your own goodness. So you'd say that when it came to goodness, I was on the wrong side. I erred on the side of goodness or moral conduct. These are words of consolation for yourself. That is exactly how we get trapped in this prakriti. The prakriti can be it can be something which can enamor us because it gives us certain results, it gives us certain good things, certain bad things. It's very difficult to stay away from it. It requires self knowledge. That is why we're doing Bhagavad Gita. So when we become prakrisita means we are identifying and confusing ourselves with the game of these gunas. That friend was never a friend of ours. You accidentally met him. He imagined a friendship. You had never had to tea together. You were in the college. You recognize him, he recognizes you. But he has targeted you. And he creates an imaginary history of friendship to get into your life, take your money, and run away. Simple. And you have created it for yourself. Why did you do it? Because you wanted to appear to be a very kind, compassionate person. That is your past papa punya. And you did not allow a very logical way of looking at it to assist you. You allowed your own ego to assist you, and you paid the price. It can happen in any, whether it's an investment decision, it's a relationship, it's giving loan or anything. This is exactly how we take wrong decisions in life. The biggest wrong decision in life, Vedanta says we have taken, is to identify with the game of the gunas as ourselves. And the way the guna plays out through this body mind complex is our activities. We are doing this. And therefore, we take responsibility. We need to do better. We need to be prominent. We need to be famous. All is the game of these gunas that Bhagwan is explaining. Therefore, he's saying he's going to explain this. So he's saying prakriti tattva rupena mithya ganena. It's a wrong thing that we have identifying with yuktasya bhogyeshu, and that we become that mithya jnana yukta and yuktasya bhogyeshu guneshu. These gunas and whatever the bhogya vastu, the whole khetra thing, sukha dukkha mohatmakeshu. So what is bhogya? Whatever is pleasurable, and dukkha is also bhogya, by the way. You look for sukha, you get some dukkha, and you have to take it. You went on a trekking in a mountainous range, and suddenly there is snowfall or heavy rain, and a lot of people lose their life. But you get stuck for 3-4 days because of landslides. It's part of the journey. So what happens? Bhogyeshu sukha dukkha mohatmakeshu. Sukha is sattvika, dukkha is rajasika, and moha is tamasika. Each word in Sankara Bhashya is very important. Sukha dukkha mohatmakeshu, sukhi dukhi mudha. I am sattvika, I am dukhi means what? I am rajasika. You don't realize, you don't say this. You say I am dukhi. What you are indirectly, without knowing, saying is I'm overcome by rajas, or I'm sort of enjoying a state of sattvic life. Sukhi, dukhi, mudha. That means what? Tamasic. Aham asmi ityeva rupa. This is that mithya jnana. That is the state of being prakritista. This state of being caught up in this trigunatmika prakriti. Yaha sangaha. This attachment, this entrapment. Yaha sangaha. Tat karanam. What is the cause of it? Tat karanam purushasya. That is the cause. That determines, that sort of is the factor which is going to decide where we will be reborn in the next life. Bhagavan has clearly explained that. Whether if you're sattvic, in which kind of family you're going to be born, you'll be born in a very auspicious family, or you'll go to or up till Satyaloka, depending on how deep is your sadhana. Rajasic, Manushya and there'll be a certain station in life, certain resources, certain family, certain profession, based on your own vasanas and papa punyas, right? And similarly, sad asad yonishu, whether you'll be born in a good family or bad family, good life station or bad life station, all determined by this sangha, this entrapment, this identification with sattva, tamas, and rajas. Joni prapti lakshanyasya. This is the karana. This identification with the guna is the karana of punarjanma in pashu or a manushya or a devalok or whatever. Sansara seti, and that is what is the cause of the sansara. Sansara is our creation. In what sense? We create sansara with our own karma. Karma here includes the way we think, the way we take our moral judgments and decisions, the way we relate to everyone, because these three gunas we just realized it's a whole cobweb of relating to the external reality, social, spiritual, whatever, and that sort of is the cause of samsara, this birth and death and the samsara. Grinabrittam sobrutina cha gunanam bandhakatvam. And Bhagavan has already explained to us how this sattva thing binds us through sukha and jnana, a rajasic thing binds us through, lobha and prayasa and prakriti and other things. And whereas tamas will have this ajnana and moha and pramada, that's how they sort of bind us. So ahamasmiti rupam sangahat samasena purva adhyaye yad uktam tad iham. What Bhagavan has already mentioned, how we are reborn in Sad and Asad Yoni in chapter 13, here he has again mentioned that with the game of the gunas and how we get trapped, he's sort of elaborating it. Earlier, he just mentioned about the Kshetra and Kshetrajna and how they get connected and how we are placed in different life situations. Now he gives us more details about it. And Sattvam Rajas Tama iti gunaha prakriti sambhavaha ityatah arabhya. From there he started in this chapter. Guna Swarupam Guna Brittam Sobrittina Gunanam Bandhakatvam Guna Britti Nibaddhasya cha Purushasya. Those a person who is bound up with these three gunas. Ya Gatihi, whatever he goes, what is his outcome? What is his life outcome? Gatihi. Ya Gatihi iti etat sarvam. All that is explained. We summarized it today. Etat sarvam mithya jnanam. This is not real. That हम यहाँ पैदा होते हैं, we become rich or poor, become famous or sad or happiness. What Vedanta will say, it's a dream. It's nothing fundamentally real. You know the details, you be sattvic, do sadhana, then go beyond it. But when we are in a deep tamasic state, hearing that this is a dream will not help us come out of it. That Bhagavan will tell us. You have to defeat tamas with rajas and defeat rajas with sattva and then go beyond it. Then you have to drop sattva and go beyond. It doesn't happen just like that. A person who is very tamasic, you know that famous story, right? Somebody was sitting below a tree, some Indian, and then there's an American. He said, "Why are you saying? Why did you go and work?" And he said, "What happens if I work? Well, you'll have a lot of money, and then what? Then you can buy a car and a house, and your children will go to good schools and stuff. And then what do I do?" He said, "Then you can take care of everything, and then you can relax." And he said, "Yeah, but what am I doing right now?" That is the typical Indian wit, right? That is in a way you're cheating actually. You don't want to do anything. You're just a bum. You're just a lazy guy. So what Bhagavan is saying here is that we have to, of course, clear the hurdles and move forward in our spiritual life, and it requires that we have to positively understand and graduate from one level of existence to another, minimize the tamasic to be rajasic, and then become sattvic rajasic, positive rajasic, and then be purely sattva pradhana, and then move forward and do sadhana. That's how is the long journey. Nishkama karma, Ishwararpana buddhi, and samarpana buddhi, all that. Ityata arabhya is now finally going guna britta nibaddhasya cha purushasya yagati etat sarvam mithya jnanam. End of the ajnana moolam. All these ways of wandering that we wander from one life to another, one mother to another, This mithya ajnana moolam cha bandha karanam. This because that is a Vedantic principle. It's a inability to realize that we are the pure self, not different from Brahman, is the cause of our getting trapped here and jumping from one life situation to another during one life or multiple lives. Bistarena Uktva, he has already explained that with all these chapters. Adhuna, now Samyak Darsanat Moksha Vaktavya Ityaha Bhagavan. भगवान ने से गुणों के बारे में बहुत बता दिया. अब बच्चे को थोड़ा मोक्ष के बारे में बताते हैं. That is how we are going to do verse number 19. नान्यम गुणेभ्य कर्तारम यदा द्रष्टानुपश्यति गुणेभ्यश्च परम वित्ति madbhavam sodhigachyati. So Bhagavan says like this. Look here. Na anyam gunebhya kartaram. Now, if we identify with the gunas, we are trapped. We are nibbadha. How? By these three gunas, we are nibbadha. Then we see this guna-baddha mind-body complex as us. And then we have this kartatva, bhaktutva, that I want to be happy, I want to be sad, I want to have this, I want to have that. Then this whole ajnana parampara continues. He says the guy who suddenly exits out of it with a lot of sadhana, gunebhya kartaram na anyam. If you are able to see that there is no karta other than these gunas, this kartitva, bhoktritva, the agency and beneficiary consciousness, that I'm benefiting from this, I have done it, and therefore I deserve to enjoy it. This sort of a mindset is not outside of this framework of the three gunas who control the way we behave, who influence the way we have results in life, and also determine the way we end our life and have another life. They're determining. Who is enjoying? That is also that sattvika or rajasika or tamashika purusha. The purusha, the pure purusha is not that. The guy who realizes the karta or bhokta, the guy who is suffering or enjoying, is essentially somebody who is a jailed person, a person in jail of sattva, tamas, or rajas. The guy who can say that there is no karta other than guna nibbadha purusha. Once Purusha is free from these three gunas, he is neither karta nor bhokta. There is no one other than this guna baddha Purusha who is karta. Yet, na anyam gunebhyaha, not different from these gunas, kartaram, yada drashta anupashyati. The guy who in such a way is able to see that gunebhyasya param vetti, and then he is able, his eyes open up. He becomes having a bit of vairagya. He takes interest in Vedanta, Upanishads, Bhagavad Gita, Sankara Bhashya, or Buddhism, in an open-minded way. Be Nisarga Dutt, Nisarganath Dutt, or you be Ramana Maharshi or Thakur Ramakrishna, whichever way is your prarabdha. So, gunebhyascha param bhakti, he sees, there is a reality beyond these gunas. That is real. That is Atma. That is Brahman. That is Ishvara. This Maya, this game is not real. Param Bhakti, the one who knows, Madhbhavam so adhigacchati. Saha Madhbhavam. Bhagavan has already said, Mama Sadharmyam. He gets my Sadharmya means Purnata, that we had said, because Bhagavan has no dharma that we can imitate and be like him. That is dualism. So he gets Madhbhavam means Brahmavid, Brahmaiva Bhavati. He becomes Ekakara. That means he has worked on that set statement. Tattvamasi. He has done a lot of Sravana Manana Nididhyasana. Let's look at the elaboration of this verse. Guna, so this is how he brings an end. He doesn't speak much about it. So let's look at Madhusudana. He speaks a little about it. So Madhusudana says, Asmin adhyaye vaktavyatvyena prastutam artham trayam. There are three things which we have discussed, which Bhagavan has mentioned, and he's discussing with it, and Arjuna will ask another question related to it. क्षेत्र क्षेत्रज्ञ संयोगस्य ईश्वर अधीनत्वम के वा गुणाः. This kshetra kshetrajna sanyoga, which is Ishvara Adhina. Bhagavan discussed that in chapter 13. And what are the gunas? He had asked that question. If you remember the last two verses, that was the doubt in the minds of Arjuna. What are the gunas? Katham vate vadnati. And katham vate te vadnati ityartha dvayam uktam. Now he has discussed how they bind us up. What are these three gunas? Okay. This has been discussed. What was the final one? Adhuna tu gunebhyah katham mokshanam. Now the doubt in the mind of the student is, अच्छा इतना खराब है ये सत्व तुम्हारा जस, इससे हम बच्चे कैसे ना? That is the question. How to be free from this? How to go beyond this? That is it. That is what is going to discuss in the remaining part of the chapter 14. मुक्तस्य च किम लक्षणम, जो मुक्त हो जाता है ये तीन गुणों से, उसका लक्षण क्या है? That will be a very standard Arjuna kind of question. You remember स्थित प्रज्ञस्य का भाषा. He had said, अच्छा ध्यान करते करते कोई मर गया, वो कहाँ जाएगा? उसका साधना वेस्ट तो नहीं हो जाएगा? The chapter 6 you remember. So he asks these questions on our behalf. Arjuna is no one. Arjuna is humanity. Arjuna represents humanity and doubts and challenges of all of us. It's just a symbol there. And this whole warfield is just our life. So that is, and then the next question is saying that if we want to sort of saying vaktavyam avasishyate katham mokshanam, how to get out of it. Tatra mithya jnanatmakatvad gunanam samyak jnanat tebhyo mokshanam mityartha. Because these jnanas are mithyatmaka, they are not real. Why mithya, you know? Not because they are tuchha, like sasavishana, like a rabbit's horn. Rabbit's horn, it doesn't exist. Like for example, somebody might say, this is a Vedantic joke by the way. आपका पिताजी क्या है? मेरे पिताजी बाल ब्रह्मचारी हैं. How did you come into existence? Your father was a celibate person. वो बचपन से ही संन्यास ले लिए थे. So how did you come into existence? This is mutually contradictory. Similarly, this particular three gunas are mithyatmaka doesn't mean tuchha. Mithyatmaka means they are vikara prapta, anirvachaniya. It's very difficult, neither sat nor asat. Like the snake we see in the rope is not completely false, because why don't you see the snake on the white wall? You need a adhisthana for any superimposition to confuse a man in the crowd as your uncle or brother or son. There has to be a person. Then you can confuse that person as your son or brother or father or friend. Similarly, there has to be something which you confuse as something else. The Brahman is being confused as Sansara. The Anatma is being confused as Atma, and the Atma is being confused as Anatma. That is what is happening in our state of being. So Bhagavan is saying, you want to get out of it for moksha. Why? Ajnana nivritti is the main qualification for our ascent for spiritual freedom. This ajnana and its work is what this Trigunatmika Maya is doing. It's a modification of avidya, that Maya, right? Mahatattva Trigunatmika thing. This Sattva Rajas, out of which Mahat and this body, mind, complex, everything has come out of it. Bhagavan has explained that beautifully. Therefore, we have to overcome these three gunas, not because they are our enemies, because they are not paramarthikatvena satya. They are not fundamentally true. They are appearances. They are superimpositions. We have to go beyond them in order for moksha. So we have to get out of it. And how do we do it? Katham tato asya muktihi ityata sorry. Tatra mithya jnanatmakatvad gunanam samyak jnanat tebhya. So when you have good knowledge about these three gunas and you have samyak jnana of atma, you can come out of it. Na anyamiti, he says in this verse. Gunebhyah karya karana vishayakara parinitebhyo. Karya karana. What is karya? Disara. Karana is all the same here. Karana vishayakara. And then we are connecting with outer things. I want to sleep on a beautiful bed, have a cup of coffee, not go to office. That is tamas. So there is some Vishayas with which our mind is connecting. I want to go to a temple and meditate. So these are Vishayakara vrittis of the Karya Karana Sanghata. So he explains here, that is what he says, that Karya Karana Vishayakara Parinatebhyaha, the Sattvatama Rajasa what? Modifications of this whole body mind complex. Anyam Kartaram Yada Drashta Vichara Kusalaha. Once a person has good understanding that there is no karta other than this vikari, this modified karya karana sangata, and these three qualities, that exactly is appearing as a sattvika karta or a rajasika karta or a tamasika karta. He is going to have sukha and jnana, or lobha and asanga, or craving, or he's going to have mudhata and apravriti and pramada, etc. Vichara kushalaha, he has some jnana. Sana anupashyati, he is able to see, he can watch, he can interrogate, he can understand. Vicharam anupashyati, gunaha eva antakarana bahikarana sarira visaya bhava pannaha sarvakarmanam kartara iti pashyati. He says, yeah, there is no real agent. When the body mind complex plays into the hands of the sattva or rajas or tamas and behaves in a certain way, it appears as if that is the karta. Now, there is a positive thing in this. It's not that God is denying your existence or something. We have crossed the time. I'll just wind up. What Bhagavan is saying is, when you are doing some sattvic karma, don't be super happy. If you are too tamasic, don't be super depressed. Because this is a certain modification which has formed in your body mind complex. You are not that. Your alasya is not you. Your alasya is not you. Your pramada is not you. Your jnana is not you. Your sukha is not you. Your dukkha is not you. You are beyond all this. That means what? That is the best consolation. And that is a very good beginning point for reasserting the truth of our Atma, the truth of our existence, which is non different from the pure consciousness called Brahman. And then we can, in fact, start our spiritual journey. Let me stop here. We'll take it forward tomorrow because we have taken some extra time. So I'll stop here. So if you have any questions, you can ask, but I'm bringing this YouTube to an end.